Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get started here, I want to just remind you to give it a like and subscribe down below if you enjoy this content. And today for our guest, we have Wesley Jaffray. He's been in former bands such as Dear Deadly, Old Style Rascals, Downfall of Society. And he also has a new company that he's been starting. And Wesley, how's it going?
The company is going great. We are called Jaffray Artist Media. As you can see, a little bit of shameless self-promotion.
Yeah.
So basically, as Ryan stated, and I want to say thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this is a very fun industry, a very evil industry, and I'm trying to provide a place for artists to get the exposure they need without worrying about getting taken advantage of. Jaffray Artist Media is a one-stop shop. Everything from studio time. We offer videography, photography, marketing, merch. You tell us what you want, we'll make it happen. Take the legwork out, and that is the start of it right now. The end game is down the line to have a venue that's going to showcase all of this, all of our artists, and one day at a time, though. You know?
So why don't you tell us a little bit about like how you got started in music? Kind of like what was your inspiration? Was there like a defining moment where you just decided like, oh, I want to get into the music business? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I had a neighbor. His name was Joe Jammer. Back in the day, he was a very famous guy. Behind the scenes, was in Aerosmith's camp, mentioned in their book. Very close to Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Hendrix rather. He was just a guy down the street playing guitar, and I happened to walk down the street, see this, and I was fascinated by that and started talking. One thing led to another. I was in his basement doing lessons. And, that's when it started to click. I went to him for about a summer, became basically just, it was a summer of lessons, and then I opted to buy ear and just tabulature, learn the rest. And then as far as the actual industry itself and the scene, I remember there's a very famous venue out here called Reggie's Rock Club.
Mm-hmm.
A few years back, a buddy of mine and I went to see MDC and the Subhumans there, and it was the first time seeing a mosh pit, live music, the energy, so it just felt right, It triggered. I had been playing for a little bit, but I'd never really been to shows, that in the local level or the local scene. And yeah, since that day, it's basically like it's been my mission to be a part of it,
Yeah. So for those listeners out there that don't know, he's a bass player. So what inspired you to learn the bass out of all the instruments?
Well, as mentioned earlier, that guy Joe was a guitarist. I did start on guitar. Bass just became easier to find work, to be honest, and it's just been kind of my niche as of late. As far as actual players go, Steve Harris, Iron Maiden, big influence, The Gallup, and Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers. So everything in between that as well,
Yeah. So what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about bass players?
I would say, as far as misconceptions, that we don't really contribute much. People just lazily follow the rhythm or the guitar, and that's not always the case. I've always been one to do riffs because I was a guitar player first. And we bring a lot more to the table than people realize. So.
How much does playing guitar first and then going to bass help out with your bass playing skills?
I would say quite a bit, honestly, because I can play lead guitar, focus mostly on bass, and it just transfers. You stand out more. You are brought up playing on more strings. I don't know.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about? You've been in a lot of bands that I mentioned previously. Why don't you give us a little bit of story on your first band, like how that got started? Like, what was your first live show, and what was that experience like as well?
The first band that I would say counts, okay, garage bands, all that, didn't really, it was just a thing, whatever. Played about 10 people, and we've all had that show. But the first band that really gained any traction, as you mentioned, was Downfall of Society. It was like a Craigslist response, met up with the singer, everybody slowly fell into place, and then fast forward like a month later, we were playing at a hot dog stand, and it was called, what the heck was it? It's irrelevant, but it was a funny as hell show. There was another band opening called Prison City Brigade. They're local legends. He did a song called "Get Famous First Then Do Heroin," which got the cops called, and it's just something I will never forget. So we went from that to opening for Michelangelo Badio. Are you familiar with him?
A little bit, yeah. It's different, definitely a familiar name.
Yeah, he's like a shredding legend. It was just a great feeling because I looked up to him when I started playing. Like who's the best at playing? You go to YouTube, you see Yngwie Malmsteen, you see Satriani, Slash, Van Halen, all that. But his name is just, it's kind of cool transition. Hot Dog to playing for that, Yeah.
Who wrote the lyrics for that band to come up with a song titled that would get you guys the cops called on?
A dude named Eddie Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
He's the vocalist of, like I said, Prison City Brigade. They just an awesome, no fucks given punk band. I do apologize if.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. But just a band worth checking out if you guys are into punk and songs with titles such as that or Octocock. Yeah.
So when you were in these bands, did you have any say in like the name of the bands, or how did that all work out?
To be honest, those 3 bands were actually pre-existing prior to my joining.
Oh, okay.
So I came in and just laid down bass. It wasn't like they took creative control. It's like, okay, you're new, put your flavor on it, and we spiced up the old songs. Some of them were fitting, so we kept the bass lines. But
yeah. So you said one of these was a response to a Craigslist ad. How did that work out? You are actually the second person on this podcast to have joined a band from a Craigslist. So how does that all come to be? I mean, you weren't afraid you were going to get like murdered or something?
Oh, I mean, there was some hesitation, but they came to me. I had my Glock. It was all good.
So, what would you say is one of the most important things that someone has to have, especially when they're joining a band, like when they're not in like the formation, kind of like you were? What would you say is one of the best qualities that a person could have then in order to be successful?
You have to be willing to work with, your bandmates, treat it like any other relationship. If you really want it to work out, I would say you have to grin and bear it and just talk things out. The music obviously has to be good at the same time, and open-mindedness. I've been in many a band with one person. I've been in the process. I mean, I've done this too, where I've taken the reins because I went to school for music business and I got very cocky about what I thought I knew. Mm-hmm. And that was the downfall of society. And, open-mindedness, and just always support the other artists that you come in contact with.
Yeah. So you're the first person on here that studied music business. Could you maybe like go over a little bit like what that entails? Because we've had a lot of people that have just done just general music, or they've just started their bands like right out of high school. What does music business really entail when you're taking that at college?
So I went to a school called Harold Washington, and basically the gist of it was, I say it boils down simply to this: is network. The class taught some theory. There's a bit about marketing, just business essentials, like Business 101. What I ultimately took out of it, though, is it really is your network is your net worth in anything in life, but especially this industry. As I stated previously, just, if you see somebody doing what you want to do, talk to them. People are more than happy to help out, especially the nationals, Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really as simple as that. Just be open-minded and be cool to your fellow musician, and people generally take care. I'm sure you as a drummer, you've been in bands, right?
Yeah. Nothing really too big, but just, just like smaller stuff. But just, it's a lot of it is who you know, and that's just like with everything else in life. But I mean, I think in music too, it's very, very much more important, because one guy that next thing could get you that one gig that changes your life. But what would you say is the biggest gig that you played at, or like most people?
Okay, I would say there's a venue right here called The Forge. When I was in Dear Deadly, we played to about 300 or so people.
Oh.
Not staggering, but it was cool to open for this band New Year's Day.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Warped Tour guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, other ones about 100 to 300 was like the consistent thing, honestly.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's a decent crowd. Could you one of the big things that we like to talk about here is kind of like the rush that musicians get, kind of like the high they get from like performing live and feeding off the crowd and being able to finally, like after maybe practicing their song a million times, finally getting able to like show it to the world. What is that feeling like specifically for you?
It's nice when you see it's just the rush, you know, to actually look into the crowd, and in the case of that project, see people singing the words back. I mean, you're making an impact in doing that, you know, and it just makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
You know.
So, do you have any particular like pre-show rituals that you do before a show, or do you just kind of wing it when you get there? How does that work?
Kind of just on the fly, you know. It's been different from band to band. Some would do vocal warm-ups. We would all just like do like a circle chant, get ready sort of thing. It's different from band to band. Have like 2 beers, take a shot, man, get up there and just knock it out, you know.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going off to kind of like, we have this part of the podcast where I keep track. I've been keeping track for every podcast where I ask you some questions and get your responses, and then we kind of make like a chart out of it. And then towards the end, once we reach a certain amount of podcasts, I'll announce the winner to all the audience and everything. But so the first question is, out of all the songs that have ever been written in the history of music, what is one song that you personally wish you had come up with yourself?
That is a good one. There are many songs out there. I guess I may be reaching here, but you know what? The song that has the most meaning to me in music is "More Than a Feeling" by Boston.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. You know, if you recall, there was a game Guitar Hero once upon a time.
Oh, absolutely. I got carpal tunnel for sure from that thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that and playing on Expert, that was really the thing that sparked it all. Was just like, I want to do this on a real guitar. And then, as I mentioned, I met Joe, and it's just a beautifully written song. Yeah. You know?
Did you ever try Through the Fire and Flames on Expert?
I did, unsuccessfully.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll rarely meet a person that's done that, and then if they're usually they're trying to cheat.
It.
Yeah.
You recall a friend of people just cheating the system. Ironically, that was keyboard, too.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the next question is, out of all the artists, dead or alive, doesn't matter, you can choose which, if you could perform one concert with any one of them, who would it be and why?
Wow. You said dead or alive?
Yeah, either one.
Okay. I would have to say Iron Maiden.
Yep, that's the second time we've gotten an Iron Maiden, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great. Mean,
they're just mind-blowing. Everything about them, the consistency of them being around since 75, and no holds bars, just still going, you know. Some that arenas.
Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast are some of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the rate that they play at, too, is unbelievable. They're just incredibly skilled. I'd say probably only like 5% of all musicians that are famous could actually maintain that rate of just fastness that they play with.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we got, out of all the venues on the planet, if you could play at one venue, where would it be and why?
That is another good question, man. I would say Castle Donington would be up there. Mm-hmm. It's a very historical place, man. Seen a lot of great videos when I was just studying other artists, man, like Guns N' Roses playing there back in the day, Ozzy. Mm-hmm. Huge capacity. I'm sure you're aware of the place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, mine's always been the Slane Castle in Ireland.
I had that on my mind, too, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's...
Peppers live there?
Yeah, I watch all those concerts, that they had there. That's especially just the countryside that you get to see when you're up. Oh, it looks amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, we got a few more. So, what would be a guilty pleasure song that if someone were to meet you, they would have no idea that you like?
Who Let the Dogs Out?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those catchy ones that just... I don't know how they do it, but like they'll come up with something like that, and then they'll make millions of dollars off of just that song alone, and then they can just retire in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that was actually my first concert, believe it or not.
What other songs did they sing besides that?
Who Let the Dogs Out and Who Let the Dog... That I recall. I couldn't tell you another one, man. You know?
I was going to say, that was probably one of those where they played it like 3 times just to make it seem longer. All right, so Last one, guilty pleasure genre.
Okay. I don't know if to say guilty pleasure. I mean, if it's good sounding music, it's good music, you know. But I've been getting into indie quite a bit. Artists like Vance Joy, George Ezra, you know, stuff of that nature. Mondo Cosmo has been pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, that's.
What about you with that?
I'd probably have to say my guilty pleasure genre would be kind of just pop music. I don't know. I don't know. I'm a sucker. I mean, not the pop music like nowadays, but more of the, I don't know, like 10 years ago, stuff like that. I mean, I had one guy on here that listed Backstreet Boys, so that definitely takes the cake, but yeah, who knows. But yeah, just more of like a pop thing. I mean, I'm more of a hard rock guy kind of myself, or classic rock. Those are like the two big ones. So yeah, I'd say I kind of have to say like pop. So okay, so now you kind of discussed it a little bit in the beginning, but your business that you started, what gave you the idea to start it, and what were some of the early struggles that you had in like coming up with it?
Yeah, no, so rewind about a year ago, I met this gentleman named Louis Vidal, incredible rapper by the name of Louis Busy, and essentially I always knew that I wanted to do this venue thing. Since I saw music at Radio, like I just wanted to be a part. I wanted that, you know, and I wanted to provide a place for artists to get exposure. I was at this thing called Transformation, which is basically group therapy. You just get everything out. A buddy insists that I go. He paid for me to go. And I go up in front of the group with no confidence whatsoever. And I'm just like, you know, I want to do this thing where I help these artists, the venue. Everything I've described what it is, I just didn't know how to go about it at the time. So I fumbled through this whole speech, and this guy walks up to me, Louis, as I refer to, and he's like, hey, man, we need to talk. He broke down what it is he was about. The next day I was at his studio apartment, which is a studio, and the gist of what we developed that day was that I would do A&R for his brand. He did studio production, he did videography, he did photography, and I was active in the scene, going to 2 shows a week then, still a thing that I do now, man. And essentially, you know, that's where the whole thing kind of started, the idea. Now towards, I want to say July or so of last year, he said to me that, you know, you should consider developing your own brand. And I'm like, I guess you're right, because his company was Dark Cloud Enterprises, and like I said, helped him out with that. And the short of the long, basically, is that, you know, in September of last year, life got to be too much for this guy, and he opted to take his own life, unfortunately.
Oh, wow.
And it is what it is. Yeah. He sort of, towards the end, told me about this studio called Gremlin Studios in Aurora, Illinois. And, you know, he wanted to move everything to there, all the artists that we were working with, because it had more professional, you know, equipment and everything, 24-hour access, and it was just a better vibe. So, you know, I was reeling from his death for like 2-3 days. I'm like, I could sit here and just like throw the towel in, or I could continue what it is we were doing together. I reached out to the place, had this artist named Alina that I was managing briefly at the time come into the studio. A buddy of mine named Mike came in. He was producing, you know, he'd always wanted to do it. He was a fitting person for it, you know. In that moment, though, like, you know, this is a woman who, like, a few weeks before knowing her, was scared to sing in front of anybody. Incredibly talented. Louis actually took her out of her shell, and then he passed. We were in studio, and there was just this moment of looking at Mike and Melina while he was tracking her, and like her actually being comfortable and seeing something clicked. I'm like, this is the greatest feeling to see them, you know. He's passionate about doing this. She's beyond passionate, and finally actually sharing it with the world. Yeah, and that was a very defining moment.
Yeah. So what would you say is one of the big struggles when it comes to managing someone? And could you maybe tell us like a little bit about how you started managing that artist before? Like, how did you get into that whole thing? The short of the long, that is people wanting to be rock stars before they're actually rock stars. I kind of have shied away from that because I am building all of this currently. But, you know, I didn't even intend to get into it. She came to me seeking a place to record, and she just wanted to get exposure. So I was like, you know what? I have a network. Let's see what we can do. Got her a series of gigs, and we're no longer working together for reasons. But yeah. So,
that's
being
fair.
a manager, what would you say is the number one overall responsibility that you have? Is it mainly booking gigs? Is it getting exposure? Or are there other aspects to it that most people wouldn't realize?
Um, I mean, yeah, you obviously have to get them gigs, but you also have to have content and things to push. You don't want to go into it without anything, you know? And in a sense, my company is hands-off management because we do offer all those services. But yeah, man, it's just getting them shows, you know, just getting exposure, marketing the product you have them in studio, get video out, you know, have professional photography. It's all about professional. You got to stand out in this industry. No, there's no denying that fact.
So, what would you say was when you were starting this business? What would you say would be kind of the biggest struggle that you had early on, and like how you got over that?
I would say the biggest struggle was adapting to marketing. That was not something I was very adept at. I'm still learning as I go. You know, it's a beast in itself. Struggle with just getting the word out, you know, and what I found is the best way of doing it, and for other artists too, is just going to networking events. There's a plethora of people out here willing to allow you to have a booth, you know, just get FaceTime, be active on the scene, and keep people in your life that share your vision, you know. Negative voices in the background are always going to be, there's just something you don't want, you know.
Yeah.
So this network, right people in your corner, and that's the gist of it, you know.
Yeah.
And things will fall in place.
So, have you reached a point yet, or was there a point early on when you kind of really started to gain traction, when you're like, oh my God, this is like actually starting to like come into place? Was there a moment that you've had so far with that?
To be honest, that'd be the last month.
Yeah.
Steady clientele have been coming in. Have a lot of great artists actually in studio right now, people doing videos. It's been consistent. It's been great, you know, and I'm blessed, honestly, that it is actually starting to take off. And yeah, it's just a good feeling to wake up every day happy to know that you're in the music industry, and it's just a good feeling, you know, to live life on your own terms and help out. So
we saw, obviously, earlier, as we're seeing right now, that you have a shirt promoting yourself. Do you have any other merch that you have made so far?
Currently, for myself, no. Just this shirt as it is. But
yeah. Do you, is there any way that like people could buy that, or is it just for you, or is there like a website that people can visit if they want to maybe get a hold of you?
Oh, absolutely. Currently, I am on Facebook as Jaffray Artist Media, as simple as that, and Instagram as @Jaffray Artist Media. And all our products and offerings are on there, as well as just information about the scene. Like, it'll keep you connected to Chicago's local scene, because as I said, we go to multiple shows, you know, and you can get a taste of what's happening here.
What would you say? I mean, I'm in the Minneapolis area, and one of the things that I discovered when I started doing this podcast was that there's a huge abundance of heavy metal in Minneapolis that I had never seen of before. What would you say is the scene like music-wise in Chicago?
There's a lot of everything. Yeah. Like, my niche has always been rock, metal, and punk. Those three bands were those genres. There's jazz, there's blues. I mean, there's everything in abundance, and that's what's so disheartening, that a lot of these guys are getting the exposure, you know? I'm sure, you know, people will drop like $200 to go see a national, but like you spend $5 and you see these up-and-coming fantastic artists pouring their heart and soul out, you know?
Yeah.
And
what would you say, like you obviously said before that you kind of need to like make yourself stand out when you're trying to like promote yourself and get your name out there. What would you say was your most effective way of doing that personally?
I would say just ultimately quality content, not quantity. And again, I mean, it all boils down to just being active and out there, you know, be on the scene. That's it.
Is there like a certain amount of like when you're meeting someone at these networking events, how are you able to like tell like if they're gonna like really help you or not? Because you, like you have said, the music business can be an evil business, and I've heard plenty of horror stories on this podcast of people getting ripped off for money, people getting treated like crap. What would you say is one of the big indicators as to maybe be able to read a person and tell if they're really good for you or not?
I mean, I would say just ask minimal questions, let them do most of the talking to gauge pay attention to body language, and then, it boils down to research after everything's said and done, though, too. You get that business card and then follow up and just see what it is your company's about, look into reviews, stuff of that nature. Research is essential. So,
and out of the bands that your business is currently having play, would you have multiple genres, or do you like to focus on a certain genre? How's that work?
Well, the niche was originally metal, punk, and rock, but it has changed. We have thrash bands in there right now. A buddy that producer I was referring to earlier, his name's Mike. He's at a project he's working on now called The Damned, which is all over the place. There's tinges of Avenged Sevenfold. There's vintage Van Halen sound. We had a gentleman named Goose Wayne who, somewhere between house, hip-hop, there's tinges of jazz in his thing. Very impressive. We've had rap artists. I mean, that's why it's artist media. I don't want to limit, but they say in business, you start at your niche, work your way to the middle, and then you go from there, So,
yeah, and
if
this is
you're
one of the
craft coachable, though, I'm more than happy to work with you.
Yeah. So this is one of the big questions that we always ask on this podcast is, since basically I'd say around the early 2000s, rock music has really gotten not as popular as it once was. It's really been on the downhill. I mean, it's not dead per se, but it's down there. And I think part of it was the rise of hip hop and other things. But what do you think personally is one of the reasons why rock kind of declined in popularity, and what are some of the ways that maybe you think it could make a comeback?
I think that, like you said, it's just because of other genres becoming pushed more so by the bigwigs in the industry. I don't know. I don't per se know why. I guess that's just kind of the trend. Everything comes and goes and then makes a comeback. And I think if artists just stick together, that's a good question, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it makes a comeback. I'm trying.
Yeah.
You're trying. We all know it's a great genre. It's just unfortunate that the masses are not as big a fan as they used to be of it,
Yeah.
I think bands like Greta Van Fleet, though,
Mm-hmm.
put that back into the forefront. Young kids bringing it up on sound back.
Yeah. What would you say are some up and coming, maybe like Chicago rock bands that people should check out?
Okay, that's an easy one. I would say personally, some of my favorites are Vice, Vise. Those guys are currently tracking in one of our studios right now, so that will be out within the next couple of months. There's a great band called The Coils, based in Northwest Indiana. Our Broken View has always been good. Bullet to the Heart, Guardsmen, Consume the Divide, the Isolated Brigade, Prison City Brigade, Underclass. Dear Deadly, I have no bad blood with those guys. They're still out there doing their thing. We just creative differences. But
it just seems to me that there is so much talent out there in the rock community still there that they just need a big break, I think, really. So what would you say would be one of the biggest qualities that you would need to have? One of the things that we also like to talk about is kind of having so one of the big things I think that we always like to talk about on here, kind of having a great attitude even when times are going tough, and kind of, being able to take the punches early on when you're forming a company or a band. How important would you say that plays to you when it came to forming your own business, being able to kind of deal with some of the negative experience first of all, and still have that positive attitude and being able to pull through?
No, it's everything. Mindset, for sure. You have to be 100% in it to win it, because if you're not, you shouldn't be doing it. If it's not your passion, it's not something you wake up to every day, happy to start the day about. I would say, it has to be your everything to make it in this industry, business in general. Because you take it upon yourself to be your own boss in these situations. If that is what you want, you want to pursue your own business. If you want to pursue being rock stars, you got to be about it and weed out those who are not committed. Your project has to be 100% in the long haul. Screen them prior to joining, stuff like that.
What would you say when you're looking for bands personally? Is there sort of like a checklist that you run through, like a mental checklist to like make sure that that you'd be successful working with them? And could you maybe, if there is one, or even if there isn't one, like what would you say personally would be some of the defining characteristics of a band that you would want to work with?
Um, bands that at this point, bands that have a track record. But just people that I get along with. I mean, at the end of the day, you are a family when it really comes down to it, like any other relationship. Commitment, quality material, or at least material that you agree that you could work on to make something better with. And just ultimately, I mean, the tenacity, that drive, it's palpable in talking to somebody, if they're actually about what they say they're about, Competence, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we leave here, is there any other bands that you're working with that you would maybe want to give a shout out to? Any bands in the company?
Let's see. Really good band we were working with recently just for some merch. It's Blues and Corduroys.
Okay.
They're very Red Hot Chili Peppers meets. I don't know. Do you recall when Tom Morello did that project with a rapper? It was a very obscure project. It was like a one CD thing, but
yeah. Now I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. We've worked with a band called Contra. They're a very good metal band. Give them a listen for sure. As I mentioned earlier, Vice, Mike Domhazel, who is currently in Sushi Roll right now. That's his main project, but the solo is on its way out. We've worked with Black Hand. They're very psychedelic influenced, next level performance. They're based out of Indiana. Lucid Empathy is a good one. I would say just tune into, Jaffray Artist Media on Facebook and Instagram, constantly updating with everybody we're working with. Get to see a new Music Monday, too, of artists we think are just worth your time, even if they do choose to work with us or not.
Yeah.
Just giving you a taste of Chicago scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everyone go follow them. I'll definitely leave a link below to their Facebook page. I'll leave a link below for Wesley's personal, if that's all right with him. If you guys want to get in contact with him,
yeah.
To give him a good shout out. But I mean, he's one of the people that are just starting out in the music business, just like how I was starting out with the podcast. And I mean, you got to support those guys because they're the new generation. They're the new voice that's going to help change music and help bring it, more back to its roots, because I think now it's just all way too commercialized, and you got to bring it back to the roots. You got to have some old school type music in there. You got to, it used to be a lot more pure kind of in my view than it is kind of like now. Now it's where it's just all saturated and all overdone. What do you right quick before we go? What do you think? What do you think is your vision kind of for like in the coming years? Like, what is your main goal? Maybe let's say 12 months down the road, or like a couple of years down the road. What is your end game?
To absolutely have a venue that has a recording studio, that has access to all of our services, a merch shop, essentially becoming a label at the end of the day, working closely with our artists and taking them from the bottom of their career to the top. You
were saying a little before that did you have a venue in mind, or were you working on getting possibly a venue?
There are some things that are a little hush-hush right now. I'm talking to people. There are a few locations that are, going to be scattered out later this week, actually. But Chicagoland, I don't like the notion of Chicago. It's very saturated.
Yeah. So what would you say is one of the biggest hurdles that you have to go through when getting a place to kind of have your music at? Is it just a lot of networking? Is it a lot of you kind of like have to show them the goods, or how does that process work out?
Do you mean to go to getting on a show?
Yeah, or no, like getting, like you said, like you were trying to get your own venue. Like what are some of the hurdles that you have to go through to get that?
Well, legalities, I mean, there's a bunch of liquor license for one. You have to be weary of parking. You have to be weary of public trans being able to go through. The places I have in mind are nice because major highways run through there. All the ones passing through the Blue Island, Midlothian area, where I'm currently at, suburb of Chicago. Noise ordinance requirement, just all the legalities. It gets, depending on location, it gets to be quite a lot. But, you just got to do your due diligence.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. Well, man, it was great having you on the show. It was great having you on the show, man. I'll plug all that other stuff. If you have any bands or any shows that you want me to definitely listen to or share on the show, I'd be more than willing to do it. I mean, we're glad to, promote all the guests that we have on here, and we wish you nothing but luck in the future, man. I really think that you guys are going to be taking off soon, especially with all the artists that you mentioned that you had having. I mean, I definitely recommend everyone who, if you forgot who they are, to definitely just go click back like 10 minutes ago and listen to him tell. But I mean, obviously, this is definitely a project that I think that we'll be seeing a lot more in the future. So definitely, man, keep in touch with me and take care, man.
And Ryan, it's very same to you. Let me know what it is you want put out there. I more than have your back. This opportunity was great. And,
absolutely. Absolutely. We will definitely be in touch. So, yeah, man, just take it easy. And this is Ryan Johnson signing out.